Okay, so this is a video combat analysis of Warhammer 40k Space Marine on PC. Figured I'd try one of these in video format instead of the usual written format, just to kind of see how it'd go over. Now obviously I can't go into nearly as much depth as I do when I'm writing it out, so I figured what I'd do with the video instead is show you what I do in the first few minutes of playing any game with combat in it. My evaluations are mostly performed like in an open area like this with no enemies, because a lot of the nuance of the combat mechanics you can kind of figure out just by playing with them. You don't necessarily need to be, in a melee. So let's just go through the buttons real quick. First and foremost, this is a game that's halfway about shooting and halfway about melee, right? So if you hold the left trigger and then push the right trigger, you shoot, just like Gears of War. So if you push X, you have melee attacks. If you push Y, you do a stun attack. If you push B, you will execute an enemy that you have just stunned, provided they enter a dizzy state. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It's mostly a matter of how much health they have. Left analog stick moves you, obviously, and A is a God of War style dodge mechanic. So those are the basic controls. Left and right bumper don't appear to do anything. They might later in the game. This is about 20 minutes into the game, by the way. So the first thing I notice is that it's Gears of War style controls, even when you're moving. So you're always facing one direction, which means you can strafe, which is interesting because thus far there is no need to strafe ever. So it's actually sort of a painful implementation, because what you end up doing most of the time is melee fighting, not shooting. And because of the way the camera doesn't really show you what's behind you, it's super frustrating. So like the first 3 seconds you're in control, you're immediately in this big fight, and you're just repeatedly slapped in the ass by things that you can't see. So that's really strange and very frustrating, like I said. So in melee, you've got this arbitrary designer-made 3-hit combo. The animation's really good in this game, and it's got good weight. Unfortunately, there's almost no effects on this combo. There's a little bit of a motion swipe on the weapon, but it's like barely visible depending on the colors underneath the swipe. But it's okay. The animation's good, but for the most part, it's okay. It's not very interesting, and that kind of makes it not very fun to do a bunch of times. You can mix it up in one way, and that's by peppering it with the stun. So you can attack once and stun to do this kick. You can attack twice and then stun to do this, like, shoulder swipey thing. And those have some effects on it, which is cool. But the stuns that are canceled out of the basic melee attacks are functionally identical to the standing stun. So there's not really any reason to ever use it unless you absolutely have to interrupt your combo, which happens sometimes, but not usually, and you'll see why when I actually go and wander into the fight. But this dodge mechanic is interesting because like everything else, the animation's good, and it's pretty heavy, and there's a camera shake, and it makes it feel decent. But I don't like how long it takes to stand back up and move again. So he kind of like, it takes a little while to get back up and get back on his feet. I mean, obviously it doesn't take that long, but like, in comparison to the God of War dodge or the Bayonetta dodge, it's just a pretty cumbersome amount of time. The problem is that it does pretty tedious input buffering out of attacks, so you can't cancel your melee attacks with a dodge whenever you want, but it buffers it. So you have to wait until the animation's done to get your dodge to come out. And it's not a reliable buffer. So most of the time it comes out, but not always, and that's the worst. So it really, really hurts this game's combat, because you're constantly getting swamped by lots of guys at once, and not being able to dodge whenever you want is actually super punitive here, and it's very frustrating. So I'll go and actually wander into a fight so you can see what that's all about. The game's pretty enough, I guess, for the Warhammer world. It's pretty. I'm a little bit sick, by the way. Sorry about my sniffling and throat sounds. Ugh. It does the Gears of War slow walk thing every time there's dialogue, which is so tedious. So sometimes, like, shooting your gun into a fight before you get there can be kind of fun, but the guns don't feel great, so it's not something I end up doing all that often. Okay, so you hit anyone with a gun a couple times, and apparently it means they're going to die in one hit. The reload indicator is so terrible in this game. So yeah, the impact animation is actually really awesome. Like, it feels great, and I love that explosive blood effect. these small orcs die in one hit, so they're just not, you know, they're not interesting to fight at all. So yeah, when you hit guys with a stun and they've lost some health, they'll go into this... Oh, okay, everyone died. Yeah, well, see, that's frustrating, because that was not an interesting fight at all, even though it like looked kind of spectacular. All I was going to say is that when you stun a guy and they go dizzy, you can push the B button to execute them, and what that means is you end up getting a whole bunch of health left and the enemy instantly dies. So it's hugely rewarding, and it's sort of overpowered in my opinion, because you can kind of just do it after any enemy has been hit once or twice with a bullet or 1 or 2 attacks. But that's basically it. I don't really feel like playing too much more of this because it's not very fun. But yeah, I figured I'd just kind of show you what I always end up doing. Like I said, you know, first few minutes my hands are on a beat 'em up. I think you should try this for yourself and kind of see what it's all about. But if this game gets significantly more interesting, I'll put a couple more hours into it. I'll update it with a new video. But for the most part, it is a combat experience that is generic implementation of very uninteresting mechanics. So that's like the end analysis of the game at a cursory glance. So there you have it, and if you'd like to see another game, let me know, and thanks for listening.